Welcome, dear dreamer, to Driftwood Stories, where shadows grow soft and marble whispers under moonlight. Tonight, let your thoughts slow, your breath fall gentle, as we sail across the sea of stars to a land of myths and memories, to Crete, an island crowned by a palace of gold and secret corridors. Beneath it lies a maze, older than sorrow, and within it a tale of courage spun from love. This is the story of Theseus, a boy who dared to step into darkness, not to conquer it, but to understand it. So, close your eyes, let the world drift far, and take the hand of the old winds, for we are going now into the labyrinth, where threads of hope shimmer in ancient stone. Chapter 1. Echoes beneath Crete. Long before the world was mapped in ink and parchment, before great cities named themselves with pride, there was a song carried by the wind, soft and slow, as if the earth itself was humming a forgotten tune. That wind would one day blow across a young man's brow, but before it found him, it passed over the island of Crete, and paused. Crete, lush and vast, cradled by the shimmering Aegean Sea, where lemon trees cast shadows on the dust, and the cicadas sang to the sun like old companions. And on its high, warm hills sat a marvel, the palace of Knossos, not built, no, but grown, as though the island herself had dreamed it into being. Corridors flowed like rivers. Columns reached for the sky, painted in red, ochre, and deepest blue. Walls shimmered with frescoes of leaping bulls, dolphin-chased tides, and priestesses in skirts as wide as twilight. Above there was beauty, but below something waited, for beneath this palace, beneath all that colour and laughter, twisted a labyrinth carved in ancient stone. No map could trace it, no torch could hold its light long within. It was a place where direction lost meaning, where echoes did not return. It was said the wind itself refused to blow through those halls. They called it the Labyrinth, and at its heart a being, not just beast, not only man, the Minotaur. He had once been a child, born of the sea curse of Poseidon. The creature was the son of Queen Pasiphae, and a divine punishment meant for her husband, King Minos. But who could blame the child for the whims of gods? Yet there was no kindness in the court, no cradle for the boy with horns, no lullaby for the one with bull's eyes. He was hidden away in the dark, behind walls built by Daedalus, the cleverest mind of the age, who regretted even as he chiselled the final stone. Time passed differently in the maze. It did not flow, it thickened, and so the Minotaur grew, alone. With each turn of the moon, his memories unravelled, leaving only fragments, the sound of footsteps, the scent of jasmine, a lullaby that might have once been real. His hands became fists, his heart a quiet ache. But far away, across the Aegean, another story was beginning. In Athens, city of marble steps and restless minds, the people bore a heavy grief. Many years before, in anger and conquest, Athens had crossed Crete and lost. As punishment, every 9 years, King Minos demanded tribute, 7 young men and 7 young women to be delivered into the labyrinth. The Athenians obeyed. What choice did they have? The sea was wide, Minos powerful, and the gods silent. So, every 9 years, A ship black as morning's cloak arrived in Crete, bearing youth dressed in white, like stars surrendered to the night. And so it was again. The ship had docked, the tributes chosen. 14 lives, trembling and brave, kissed by their parents one last time under an uncertain sky. Among those watching was a boy. Not a tribute, but he might as well have been, for when the list of names was read, his heart had twisted with the weight of every syllable. Theseus, son of Aegeus, king of Athens, yet no throne curved his spine. He was tall, yes, with arms like olive branches and the quiet strength of someone who had lifted others his whole life. But it was his eyes, deep, steady, stormlit, that told the truth of him. He listened, he remembered, he felt. From boyhood, he had helped the baker carry her baskets, fetched pails for old fishermen, and sat with the grieving. He did not speak of destiny, but of duty, and when he heard that yet again Athens would bleed, that yet again innocent lives would be swallowed by a maze across the sea, he could not stay silent. "I will go," he said, not shouted, not wept, just spoken like a truth already carved in his chest. His father argued, the court despaired, but Theseus was not moved by fear. Not because he thought he could not die, but because he knew others should not have to. As twilight fell upon Athens, and the white-clad youths prepared for their voyage, Theseus stood among them, not above them. One more name, one more hope. That night, before they sailed, an old woman placed a hand on his arm. She had lost her daughter to the last tribute. Her eyes were dark wells of grief, and yet they held a flicker of light. "Not all monsters wear horns," she whispered, and Theseus nodded. As the ship pulled away from the port, black sails stretching like wings of morning, Athens held its breath. Theseus did not wave. He simply watched the land fade, the sea widen, and the stars begin their slow, old dance above him. Somewhere, deep beneath Crete, the Minotaur stirred. The Labyrinth listened, and the wind, that ancient wind, whispered, "Something has changed." Chapter 2, Theseus sets sail. The sea at dawn is a soft thing, not the roaring beast of stormy tales, nor the endless blue of poets, but a mirror of breath, holding the first blush of sun like a secret. It was on such a morning that Theseus and the 14 chosen youths sailed from Athens to Crete. The ship was large, carved from cypress, and stitched with linen sails dyed deepest black. Its prow was shaped like a swan, gliding silent over the still water. There was no music, no festival, only the quiet creak of timber and the rustle of fear in linen garments. Theseus stood near the mast, hand resting lightly on the wood. He had spoken little since they'd boarded, not from arrogance, but from reverence, for the moment, for the others. Around him were boys and girls barely younger than he, faces drawn pale by grief and the weight of unspoken goodbyes. One of them, a girl named Myra, had lost her brother in the last tribute. She carried a folded piece of cloth in her sleeve, his, and held it to her lips when she thought no one watched. Another, a boy named Kairos, whispered prayers to a wooden charm. Each time he touched it, his eyes closed and he seemed smaller, like he was trying to disappear into the folds of his memory. Theseus saw them all, and in the silence of the deck He made a quiet vow. If we walk into the dark, then I will be your light. The journey took several days. The sky was clear, the wind mild, as though the gods had chosen to still the world for what was to come. By the second evening, the crew began speaking again. Quiet stories, songs sung low. Theseus sat among them, listening. He told no tales of heroism. He spoke instead of stars. How they move across the sky like drifting leaves, how sailors once used their stories to find home. He asked questions, and when the others spoke, he listened as if every word was a treasure. On the third day, the island came into view. Crete rose from the sea like a sleeping beast, vast and green, with mountains crowned in mist and shores brushed by olive trees. The palace of Knossos shimmered on the hill, its painted walls visible even from the harbour, glowing red and gold in the morning light. But beneath its beauty, the shadow of the labyrinth lingered. As the ship docked, soldiers in crimson cloaks waited. They bore the sigil of the bull and did not speak. The Athenians were led inland, through winding streets where curious eyes watched from behind shutters. Some faces held pity, others guilt, and some nothing at all. Then from the palace gates a voice, "Wait!" She stepped from between two guards, not with fear but grace. Ariadne, daughter of King Minos. Her gown flowed like sea foam, her hair a river of dark gold, and her eyes, gods, her eyes, were ancient, not in age, but in knowing. They held the sorrow of someone who had grown up beside a locked door and listened for cries in the night. She looked at the tributes one by one, her gaze soft, as if blessing them silently. Then she stopped at Theseus. "You are not afraid," she said, though it was not a question. "No," Theseus replied, "only unwilling to let fear be the final voice." She tilted her head, a slow smile touching the edge of her mouth, not joy, but recognition. "Come," she said, "the sun is high. Let us show you the light before the dark." And so they were brought into the palace, not to cells, not to cages, but to open chambers with woven mats and fruit laid out on bronze platters, as if kindness could soften what awaited. That evening the palace burned with torchlight. Dancers spun in the courtyard, and music rose like incense into the stars. It was not a celebration, not truly, but a ritual older than Minos himself. A final feast before the letting go. Theseus watched Ariadne from across the fire. She moved like a whisper between musicians and wine-pourers, touching shoulders, lifting chins. Not a princess above her people, but among them, and when she passed near him she paused. "You don't drink," she observed. "These aren't days for forgetting," he said. A pause. "Then you will remember everything." "Yes," Theseus said, "even the silence." She looked at him for a long moment, then softly, "Meet me at moonrise, the garden behind the olive wall." He nodded. Later, beneath the silver light of the moon, among vines heavy with bloom and the rustle of laurel leaves, they met again. Ariadne held a small bundle in her hands. She unwrapped it carefully, a spool of golden thread. "This thread," she whispered, "was spun by the high priestess of Gaia, mother of the earth. It is said to carry memory, direction, and heart. It will not lead you wrong." Theseus looked at the thread, then at her. "Why are you helping me?" Her hands tightened on the cloth. "Because I have heard the cries beneath this palace for 10 years, and no one has dared name them. Because my brother—" She stopped, swallowing. "The Minotaur? Yes. He was once called Asterion. He was kind, gentle. The gods changed him. The court buried him. My father, he hides his shame behind ritual. But I remember the boy who sang to me, who braided flowers into my hair." Theseus's voice was soft. "You want me to free him? I want you to see him," she said, "and do what is right, not what is expected." He took the thread from her, careful as if handling light. "I will not walk blindly." Ariadne stepped forward. Her hand brushed his. "Then you may yet find your way out." And as the palace slumbered and the moon walked across the sea, the labyrinth stirred once more, sensing the one who would soon step into its depths. Chapter 3. The Golden Thread. Dawn came slow to Knossos, the kind of morning where the world holds its breath. No bird song, no breeze, only the hush before something sacred. The air was heavy with the scent of salt and roses, and the palace stones seemed warmer beneath bare feet, as if the sun, too, was watching. Theseus stood at the threshold of the labyrinth. Ariadne had met him in the courtyard just before first light, her hair braided with olive sprigs, her eyes wide and ancient. "I cannot go with you," she whispered. "But the thread will. Tie one end to the entry post, and do not let go." He nodded. The golden thread glimmered in his hand, impossibly fine yet strong, like sunlight made solid. He wrapped it around his wrist and fastened it to the carved horn of the entryway. The door opened with the groan of age, stone on stone, not loud but heavy, as though the labyrinth was breathing him in. And then he stepped inside. At first there was light. Slivers of sun spilled through high vents. The walls, smooth and cool, bore faint etchings, symbols lost to time. Some spoke of gods, others of paths walked long ago, but quickly the light faded. The corridors narrowed, then widened, then twisted in ways that betrayed logic. There were no right angles, no true paths, only curves, spirals, dead ends that looked like doorways, and doorways that whispered of dead ends. Theseus moved slowly, one hand on the thread, one on the wall, breathing soft, listening. The silence was not empty. It was watching. The labyrinth was alive in its own strange way, not with voice, but with memory. Every step Theseus took echoed not just around him, but through him. He began to see things, not ghosts, not illusions, but impressions, as though the walls remembered. He passed a spot where the stone was scratched, a dozen frantic lines spiralling into nothing, a place where a carved name had been worn smooth by trembling fingers. A shoe, small and broken, abandoned beside a corner where the air felt colder. Here the sacrifices had walked, and here they had wept. Theseus felt the weight of every one. His grip on the thread tightened, but amid the sorrow he found something else, a murmur, soft, rhythmic, breath, not his own. He followed it, careful as wind over sand. The halls grew wider, the air warmer, and then, at the edge of silence, a room opened like a sigh, round, enormous, shadowed, and at its centre, curled like a fallen statue, was the Minotaur. Theseus froze. This was no monster rampaging through flame and fury. This was a creature sleeping in the dust, ribs rising and falling with heavy breath. Muscles vast, fur matted, horns curved and yellowed with time. A chain of iron hung from one wrist, trailing into the dark, but it was loose, rusted. The creature could leave, Theseus realized. It simply did not. And then, as if sensing him, the Minotaur stirred. One eye opened. Amber, tired, not wild. It did not roar. It looked. Theseus stepped closer. "I know your name," he said. "Asterion." The Minotaur blinked, slow. That name, his name, drifted through the silence like a long-lost song. "I am not here to kill you," Theseus said. "I came because I could not let more children die. But I see now. You are not the hunger. You are the prison." Asterion shifted. His mouth moved, cracked with disuse. A low sound emerged. Not speech, but ache. A groan of memory. Theseus sat on the stone floor, thread still in hand, and there they stayed. Two shapes in the dark, one with a beast's face and a boy's soul, the other with a sword he no longer wished to raise. Theseus told him stories of Athens, of the stars, of Ariadne, who remembered the boy behind the horns, and in return Asterion reached into the dust and drew a spiral, the maze itself. Slowly, with careful claw, he traced a second line beside it, and a third, and a fourth, each one reaching outward. He was showing a way out, not just for Theseus, for both of them. And Theseus knew then this was not a place of punishment. It was a place of forgotten things, truths buried under fear, pain mistaken for evil. He stood, walked forward. Asterion rose, towering above, but he did not move to strike. Instead he knelt, bowed his horned head, and Theseus, without a word, laid a hand upon it. Not in victory, in blessing. Then, guiding the golden thread back through the maze, Theseus walked, and Asterion followed. The labyrinth did not fight them. It opened. Chapter 4, Within the Labyrinth. The way out is never the same as the way in. Within the labyrinth, time folds like cloth. What seemed mere minutes might have been hours. Paths once twisted now aligned, and at every corner the air grew lighter. Not because the danger was past, but because the choice had been made. Theseus walked steadily, the golden thread slipping through his fingers like a living whisper. Behind him, silent but sure, came Asterion, no longer the monster of legend, but the shadow of a boy once held beneath marble dreams and royal shame. The great beast moved with unexpected grace, shoulders vast, breath low. Where before there had been hunger in his legend, now there was weariness, not of body, but of spirit. Each footstep told a story, the marks in the dust, the old etchings on the stone. Theseus noticed them now not as warnings, but as memory. He saw where fingernails had clawed at the wall in despair, but also where smooth stones had been placed in rows, like some lost child once tried to make a garden in the dark. He paused beside a series of carvings, lines of bulls and suns, and a small spiral that Ariadne had once worn on her necklace. Asterion touched the wall gently, as if to say, "I remember this." And so the two kept walking, following the thread of light back through the silence. It was not until the final corner, when the door to the outside glimmered like dawn itself, that Theseus spoke again. "They'll be afraid," he said, "when they see you." Asterion said nothing, but his eyes softened. "I'll stand with you." The Minotaur bowed his head once. That was enough. Outside, the sun had risen higher. The palace walls gleamed with golden sheen. Birds called, distant and strange, as if sensing that something ancient had shifted. The guards at the Labyrinth gate froze as the two emerged. First, Theseus, his hair damp, his hands steady, the golden thread trailing like a comet's tail. And then the Minotaur. They raised spears, but did not thrust. Ariadne stepped forward before any could speak. "Hold," she commanded. Her voice was no longer soft, but thunder quieted into stillness. She moved between the guards and the creature, arms raised not in defence, but welcome. "This is not the beast," she said. "This is my brother." The court was silent. Then King Minos stepped down from the upper gallery, his robes dragging, his brow heavy. His eyes fell upon Asterion. His lips parted, but no sound came. For a moment the mask of rule cracked, and beneath it, a man who once left a boy in the dark. "I thought you were lost." Asterion met his gaze without rage, only weariness. "You left me," he said, voice deep, hoarse, but clear. "And I waited. It was not accusation, not fury, just truth laid bare." Minos staggered back a step. The courtiers whispered. The guards lowered their weapons. Then, quietly, Theseus stepped forward. "I did not slay a monster," he said, his voice steady. "I listened to a brother. I walked with a soul. If there is justice in Crete, then it must begin with seeing what we turned away from." Ariadne reached for Asterion's hand, and the people, slow as stone warmed by sun, began to bow their heads. That evening no sacrifices were prepared, no songs of mourning were sung. Instead, in the great hall of Knossos, a different kind of feast was laid. A feast not of celebration, but of witnessing. Asterion did not sit among them. He chose the garden, where the moonlight touched the olive leaves, but the door was left open. And for the first time in years, the music reached him. Theseus sat beside Ariadne, the thread still looped at his belt. "You saved him," she said. "No," Theseus replied. "He saved himself. I only chose to see him." A pause. "And what will you do now?" she asked. "I will return to Athens," he said, voice quiet. "But I will carry this thread with me, and I will tell the truth, not the tale of a beast slain, but of a brother freed." Ariadne smiled, not with joy but peace. "You will change the world," she said. "No," Theseus replied, rising, "but I'll change the story." Chapter 5, Thread of Dawn. Dawn did not come all at once. It arrived slowly, as if reluctant to disturb the hush that had settled over Crete. A hush, not of fear this time, but of change. The sea shimmered in palest silver. The air was cool and still, and the sun crept soft as a thought, brushing the palace with a golden sigh. The harbour was quiet. No soldiers stood with spears, no bells tolled in mourning. Instead, the people came barefoot, wrapped in simple cloth, silent not with dread, but reverence. At the edge of the dock, the black-sailed ship bobbed gently. The same ship that had once borne offerings now waited to carry stories home. Theseus stood at the prow, The golden thread still looped around his wrist, its end curling like ivy across his palm. He looked not like a conqueror, but a boy grown old in the space of days. The 14 Athenian youths were beside him, not broken, but changed, no longer tributes. Witnesses, carriers of memory. A murmur passed through the crowd as Ariadne stepped forward. She wore no crown, no jewels, only a robe the colour of olive leaves, and in her hands a second thread, this one spun with silver. It gleamed like moonlight, cool and quiet. She raised it and tied it gently to Theseus's wrist, beside the first. "One for the way in," she said softly, "and one for the way out, for what we carry and what we leave behind." Theseus held her hands a moment longer. "I will not let them forget," he said. Ariadne's eyes shimmered, but she did not cry. "Even if they do, the Labyrinth remembers, and so do I." They stood like that, still as statues, not in farewell, but in knowing. Behind them, beneath the shade of ancient trees, stood Asterion. He did not hide his face. No longer did he lower his head to avoid stares. He stood tall, horned, yes, and vast, but also still, as if rooted in the earth like the olive trees around him. His eyes met Theseus's one last time, and though no words passed between them, there was something spoken in that silence. Not forgiveness, not apology, something deeper. A thread neither gold nor silver could ever bind. Theseus bowed, slow and deep, the bow of one equal to another, and in return Asterion lifted one great hand and placed it over his heart. Then he turned, stepping into the olive grove, disappearing among the branches and dappled sun, not to flee but to dwell. A life not exiled but chosen. The ship pulled away from the dock, its sails catching the soft morning breeze. The Athenians stood in quiet formation, watching Crete drift from view. Myra carried a satchel of olive leaves and stones from the palace garden. Kairos now wore his brother's charm, the one he had thought lost, returned to him by Ariadne just before they boarded. The voyage home was gentle. Waves lapped like lullabies against the hull. Dolphins danced near the bow, and the sea, ever mercurial, seemed to sigh in peace. One evening Theseus sat with the others beneath the stars. He held the 2 threads in his lap, fingers tracing the pattern they made as they twisted around each other, gold and silver, light and dark, past and future. He told stories then, not of heroes and monsters, but of choice, of seeing what others refused to, of a labyrinth that did not hunger but waited, of a beast who had once been a boy, and a sister who had dared to love the forgotten. The others listened, not as audience, but as fellow keepers of the tale. When at last they reached Athens, the city stood waiting. From the cliffs, King Aegeus watched with desperate hope, but as the black sails crested into view, he stumbled backward. He thought the worst had come. Theseus saw this and rushed ashore. He found his father half collapsed by the temple steps. He lifted him, wrapped him in his arms, and whispered, "I am here. I have returned." Aegeus looked into his son's eyes and wept, not just for relief, but for the man he saw now standing before him, a man who had left a boy and returned something more, not because he had fought, but because he had seen. In the days that followed, Athens listened to Theseus, To the other returned tributes, to the soft truth beneath the hard legend. No statues were raised, no horns were sounded. Instead, a garden was planted near the western edge of the city. Olives, laurel, cypresses. At its heart, a simple stone with a carved spiral, the symbol of the labyrinth. It was not a place of mourning, but memory. And sometimes, just before sunset, the breeze through the branches would carry a sound, like hoofbeats, gentle and slow, as if someone was walking the garden paths unseen. Years passed, but Theseus kept the threads. He wore them on festival days, and when people asked what they were, he would smile. "This one," he'd say, touching the gold, "led me through the dark, and this, brushing the silver, led me home." In time, myths would shape themselves as they always do. Some would say Theseus slew the beast with shining sword, others that he abandoned the girl on a foreign shore. But those who listened closely, who closed their eyes and leaned into the hush of dusk, would know the truth. They would whisper the real story, that in the heart of the labyrinth a boy saw a brother, that a thread bound not a path but a promise, and that sometimes the greatest hero is the one who chooses to walk with, not strike against. And if you listen very quietly, in that space between sleep and waking, you may still hear it, a footstep, soft, a breath, slow, and the golden thread trailing like dawn across ancient stone.